Okay, well, we're doing a little film here. This farm, I think, originally might have been built as a Sutton farm. Sutton, S-U-T-T-O-N. I believe that's who actually built this place, and they were a wealthy, very wealthy family in this area. So, where to begin? So this was a working farm back in the day. I don't know what all they had. I know my dad had sheep here and whatnot. So, while we were here, we got here about 1964, just as a guess, something like that. And I don't actually remember coming here. I was so young, but we all grew up here, so this is a family homestead. So, this barn behind me, which, can you see the barn? The barn behind me, which is now just one story, used to be a two-story big barn, and I remember it having hay in it and whatnot. It had when my dad had sheep, I remember going inside this barn right here and looking up, and you could see the loft, the second floor, and you could see, I remember seeing bales of wool. They kind of put them in bales like hay, but smaller, and that being up there because my dad would wait until the price of wool would go up. So he'd sell it when it was high, I guess. But this now, since 1972 or 3, when Hurricane Agnes came through, that's when this barn blew down. It was pretty, I guess it must have been structurally unsound. So then after that, my dad decided to build a garage out of it, and it's just one story. So right here's what you see, if you can see in there. It's just a one-story building now. It's got a concrete floor still. That would have been probably what was in it originally. Where you first look down here, there's names of I think my dad's name, and he wrote probably some of our kids' name in it, but the whole floor itself would have been all concrete back in the day. So it's all just one story now. But back I remember as a kid coming down here, there was always chickens running around, and as I say, my dad had sheep, and different times he had horses, not horses, probably one horse, a pony, a milk cow normally. And at one time my mom had peacocks she raised here. But at any rate, I remember coming down here, so the chickens would run around and the roosters would chase you. We didn't like the roosters. They'd chase you. And I don't remember ever being attacked by one, but I remember they chased you. You thought they would. So anyway, this is just a garage now. And I guess the people who buy this are going to probably knock this down because it's not useful. They're probably going to turn it into working farm again someday maybe. So in here, there's some rocks. Like here's a date of 1898, and it's got the kind of writing like you would see on a tombstone. So someone did a nice job on them. Then other years are probably put in.
51.
Yeah, 1951. So the nicest one is 1898. And the other ones are put on after that are probably just subsequent owners or people who worked here or something. So back in the day, my mom told me this, that back sometime in the past, that a person stopped and asked about if he could just look around or something, and apparently he was a worker here at one time. He worked for the farm, worked on the farm, and so I think my mom said he was a colored fella, and not behind me, but in front of me actually is a cement block that might have been where they had a mobile home or something, and the idea we've thought of lately is maybe they use the water from this barn as the water for that, maybe. But right now it's just we're cleaning it out because we're selling it, and my dad converted it over, and I remember in this back spot, probably, I'm trying to remember exactly, we actually were working on cars before he even finished it. He had it cleaned out and the floor was clear here, but the sun could beat down on you down in here. I remember working, he had a 69 Firebird back there somewhere, I remember, and you had to have the motor pulled out, and boy was it hot down in here because the wind couldn't get you from the side. And so I remember coming down here, it was really hot working on it. Boy, I didn't like it either, trying to get the motor mounts out, and the Firebird, it was 69 Firebird, and it sat low to the ground, and I never did anything like that. That's my first beginnings of working on cars, I guess, and boy, I was not happy. I said, boy, I was really angry. I didn't want to do it, but through that kind of stuff, I think my dad said, well, you just got to make your mind up. If you're going to work on cars, you've got to decide that you want to or you don't. So he kind of gave me the pep talk there, and that kind of calmed me down. Then we went back to work on it again, and we change the motor and whatever.
And 50 years later.
So 50 years later, still doing that kind of stuff. So what kind of questions you got, Axel?
So, besides the Firebird, do you remember anything else that might have been stored in here from your father?
So I don't remember. I know my dad had a nice tractor, which I have now, an International 350 utility. He kept that in the other side because it was really nice. I think he felt that was the nicest tractor he ever bought, and it was really nice. So he kept that down here, but that was recent years, like in the last 15, 20 years. So you can close these front doors so it could stay out of the weather. Now it hasn't stayed out of the weather since my dad passed away. Unfortunately, it's been kind of out to the elements. You can see the concrete floor here. All this was probably when it was a working farm that was all put here. And you can see the stonework. They laid up the stone foundation, so that was back in the day. I was trying to remember the person who my dad bought this from. The family lived around here, but or the same name. I can't remember what it was now. But he worked the farm as an actual working farm. That's probably in the 50s. And as I say, right now I can't remember his name. But you can still look around and see the hand-hewn beams up in here. Up through here, you can see where they notched them out and stuff, handmade stuff. You know, they did it by hand. It wasn't cut with a saw or anything like that. It was cut with a hatchet type thing. They're still in here, some of them. Then my dad used, right here is, if you look at this wall, that's what the barn would have been covered with originally. That's that locks in place. He reused that for a wall in here. And I remember people would stop and buy some of that off him once in a while, that old barn board, because they put in kitchens and whatnot. So I don't remember any other cars being down here. Well, I do remember Brian Pratt and we pulled an engine out of a 66 Fairlane. I think it was a 221 V8. I remember pulling that out, and that was a mistake, probably, because that car never did get put back together. It ran and all. He wanted to put something else in it, I guess. And I'm sure a lot of cars have been in here and worked on in this garage / barn area. We all call it the barn, I guess.
No, we've done the barn. Is there any significance of this field that you want to tell about?
Okay, so we should walk back out. So significant things that I remember. First thing is this pile right here. I don't know if you look at this big, it's still like a little hill mound. That's still the remains of this being, when my dad did have animals still, they were in this other part over here, this other area. And all that is what he pulled out with I think he might have rented a skid steer, I think, but that's all was manure, and it's still 3-4 foot tall, even up, and that's been there probably 30 years or more or whatever, maybe more than that. But that's right there. It's still there. It needs to be bulldozed level now, but that was good fertile stuff there. And then straight back from there, there's a little tree behind there. There's a concrete block I found when I was mowing, and my mom said they used to have a windmill there. So they must have either generated power, I guess, or something with a windmill. It's a small concrete block with some metal bolts or something sticking out of it. I never remembered that. I had to ask her what that was. I don't remember there ever being anything there. I don't even remember that cement block being there, but it's an old thing. Then there's a water trough right here that was always used for watering the animals right here. It still holds water if you were to put it in there, I'm sure. And then this field here, so I remember it's all closed in now, but it wasn't back in the day. It was all cleared. This field here goes way up top to our boundary, and that during the winter, some winters, it would be all snowy, then it would thaw, and then freeze again, and that would be a sheet of ice top to bottom. And we used to sled ride through that whole field. We'd probably sled ride when it wasn't, but it was really icy then. You go all the way to the bottom, and there's fences in here, so you could hit the fence pretty easy because you couldn't stop. I think my sisters did hit the fence, go through the fence. But this was all fenced in. This acreage was all fenced in through the years.
Back in the day, how many acres do you think your dad owned?
Okay, so back when he bought, I think it was like 130 or 140 acres he owned, from this land on this side and across the street and up the road. And a lot of people have bought land, and he gave us land, us kids. But yeah, there's a lot of acreage back in the day. Even now it's 30 some acres. It's still to some people that's a lot because it's so expensive to find and get. So yeah, and this, I don't know if you can see it in the view, but this building here, my mom had chickens in. Some fancy chickens and whatnot, but they kind of got murderated by predators through the years, so she just couldn't have them. And then down here, you can't see, but there's a mowed yard. My dad would flood areas and block it off and flood it during the winter, some winters, and make it into a skating rink. My mom and him would go out skating, do skating, I guess you call it. And into the left of that, little place is where there used to have a lot of lilac trees. There still is, but it's overtaken by box elder trees. They take over everything. And at any rate, so those could have very well have had an outhouse there, especially being so close to the cement block. They might have had been an outhouse for the hired help or whatnot, or everybody. But I found an 1828 penny there with my metal detector many years ago. I don't have any more, but it's perfect shape. It was encrusted with something, but you could see there's all the details there is perfect, which is unusual.
And this wraps the segment of outside.
Okay, so before we go into the house, this is the outside of the house. So you can see that most of it's been redone with siding. And we were told by a neighbor guy that was young at the time, back in the day, before we ever bought this, and he would go by here. He said this was like a mansion, this house. As they say, rich people owned it, and it supposedly was an inn or a place you could get a room at. So anyway, back in it was really fancy. It had some fancy woodwork. There's still some fancy woodwork inside the house, but the outside had fancy woodwork too. We've never found a picture of this house yet of what it looked like back then, but you can see it had a lot of rooms, so you could rent rooms and whatnot. And it's actually a nice looking house. It's dilapidated now, but we think this end room, or at least the last little place that juts out, which maybe past a tractor there, we think that was added on after everything. And actually we think that everything you see that's not sided, we think was added on after it was originally built to make it into a porch and whatnot. But it's kind of a stately house, and again, they put a lot of money into it. And when I get up here, there used to be a sidewalk and a cement block right where about maybe inboard of where that car is. There was a square cement block. I remember as kids, we always remember it, and coming out, I think it said Sutton on the side of it. It was imprinted into it, embossed into the concrete, and it had a thing where you could tie a horse to. It had a big metal loopy thing, big. We'd like to find that. My sister would like to have that, but we don't know what happened to it. But because my dad took the cement block out. But anyway, there's a square cement block, and then even today, if you were to dig down, leading from that to the house, I used to do it when I was a kid, and there's actually little like 1-inch square tiles of different colors. So that had to have been paved with little tiles at one time, really nice looking. It had to have been nice and expensive, but now it just got covered over with concrete. But if you dug down through, you would find that there's some of those tiles left in there. So again, I don't know when this was built, but I'm sure that it's probably mid 1800s or something like that, maybe before, but I don't think this is the first house built in this area. I'm sure of that, but the people who did build it, they probably had a lot of family around here at one time.
Now for the inside.
Okay, so this is the inside of the house, or start of the inside of the house. This has always been the kitchen area where we ate our meals, and the table always sat in this area somewhat. But this room here used to have a tall ceiling. It's been dropped down so it could be heated easier. My dad did a lot of insulating and whatnot here. But I don't know exactly where in here, but underneath this floor, underneath here somewhere, there used to be a well. So it probably was a well that fed the house, to get water. But again, this wasn't, I don't know how much of this would have been original because it's been added onto it. Might have been outside. But anyway, they covered up the well. I don't know if my dad did it or who did it, but it's covered up, and you can't get to it. Down cellar, you can't get to this area. So I don't know exactly where it is, but this has always been what we considered the place to eat. My mom would cook here. The stove's always been here. And then things are kind of the same. Things don't change probably in houses. We always hung our clothes over here. I mean, that's always been a coat closet type thing, even though it's open like that. And to the left of us is a room we always had the freezer in, so of course we call it the freezer room. But that's never been heated. But that's kind of like had the freezer and other junkies in there. So yeah, this room. Oh, go ahead.
Is there any specific memories or special memories you have in this room that you can just say?
I have a memory. It wasn't my memory necessarily, but I remember we had the table here. I think one time my sister Mary, I don't know, she went to kick her shoes off or something, just kick them off her feet. She didn't mean anything by it, but went right through the window and broke the window and hurt. My dad took right off chasing her. She could tell you more about that story, but I remember that. It still broke, but I don't know if that's from when it broke then. I don't remember, except I just remember my mom always making hamburgers, and my dad he loved hamburgers, so she'd make hamburgers first thing in the morning. Well, when you're a school kid, anybody, you don't want to smell a hamburger first thing in the morning, but she was making his lunch. I remember that all the time. I remember my mom always made homemade stuff. Of course, as a kid, you don't appreciate the homemade stuff, but that's the best. But back then, we wanted, I don't know what we wanted, but we didn't like the homemade, like, for instance, macaroni and cheese. We'd rather have Kraft macaroni and cheese. But she would make the real stuff with crackers on top and stuff, and it was really good. But I remember they didn't have a lot of money, even though my dad always worked, and he had the farm. He did both. And I remember we ate a lot of fish sticks, which actually tasted good, I thought, in a day. Fish sticks, and like as I said, my mom would make things she called cracker burgers. She'd take cracker and different fillers to fill in so that the hamburger went farther. And she was a good cook and all that, so she did a lot of canning. She did make a lot of jellies and jam, and she used to make some they were called watermelon cookies, watermelon rind, not cookies, pickles. She made a lot of good cookies too, but she made pickles and whatnot. She made everything. She was a really good cook and good. She's very crafty.
On to the next room.
Okay, so going to another room. This was always a spare room. It's kind of a place that held a lot of stuff that was just not used. But I think we did use, on some occasion, we must have used it because that door there sometimes is open. This door is a folding door. Again, this is really fancy. We think this might have been a parlor of some kind where they would maybe have parties or maybe even have funerals for people in here, when someone passed away. But it's got hardwood floors still, kind of lumped up and bulgy, but a fancy little room here. We did have a pool table in here one time, so we played pool in here, had our big fancy pool table. But mostly it just housed, in the recent years, just housed extra stuff. It's never, when we had a wood stove, we always heated with a wood stove, and this probably was heated a little bit by then, and we've used it maybe. This room here we use more than anything else. This is, we call it living room. And that carpeting my dad put in there is still here today. Kind of dates it, but this room, you can see, look how fancy that fireplace is. Really fancy. It's marble. It's all chipped up because of me. Because when I was a kid, I was doing stuff here. You can see it's all chipped up. I was hammering something on it. Dummy me, not knowing. But this is fancy. And it has, you may not see it, but these are all carved. Really nice, intricately carved. It's just really nice. We never used it for a fireplace because fireplaces lets all the heat out. I don't remember using it for a fireplace. But the chimney is still there. It's able to be used. Is that any better? Yeah. But my dad did a lot of improvements. Again, did the ceiling and paneling and stuff. And it's always been a place. I remember sleeping down here too. We'd lay all these, there might have been, I don't know if it was probably bedding and stuff, and we'd sleep in this room because it's so cold, and right in the next room over is where the wood stove would be. So I remember this is a TV room. We had the TV in here and whatnot. My memories of this room is basically just sleeping in here and watching TV. Then one time we were in here, I remember Dave Johnson and Mark Johnson and my sisters and all of us, and my parents were gone or something. We heard a really loud a really loud bang from up in the attic, we think, from upstairs. That was kind of startling, but the guys went up and checked it. There wasn't anything there, but I remember that being in this room. That's because we all hung out here, and it's again, if this ever gets restored, it'd be beautiful to see. The woodwork is still here, a lot of it, but I'm sure a lot of it isn't here. been changed, but so that's all I remember about this room. I don't have any stories to say. My mom always put her over to my right. My mom always had an air conditioner in late years and right here. And outside of the window, it's all overgrown. That was always just a yard, but now it's overgrown with junk things. So
on to the next.
yeah, this is a room our cat, my mom's cat, is kept in right now. Our poor cat, for my mom's cat actually, it's blind, but it's a nice cat. The only bad thing is if you start petting it, it might actually try to bite you. I don't know if it's doing it just to get close to you or what, but it's my mom's cat. Kept my mom company for the last few years of her life. And lady, she passed away too. That lady was a dog, and those two kept my mom company. My mom refused to go to be in the hospital or anything like that. She always afraid of going to be put in a nursing home. So that's a good fear to have, I guess, because who wants to do that? But she did a lot on her own. This is the stairways. Probably I was just talking, thinking how many people have fallen down these steps in the life of this house. We did once in a while come down these steps. They're really steep. They're not OSHA. Back then, OSHA wasn't even thought about. They're kind of really steep. But we did add in some railings for my mom so she could go up and down. But look at how fancy the banister and everything is. Just all hardwood up here originally. Just a fancy house. But yeah, we used to fall down those steps once in a while. We never got hurt really, too bad. But take a tumble down there, you know what happened. Okay, so this room is a room I had when I was growing up. Pretty much, I don't think I had another room, but so one nice part about this room is that chimney's right there. It's good and bad. It's warm there because there's a chimney, so you get a little warmth out of it. The bad thing is when you can see the black stuff that's oozing down it, that's probably creosote when it rains or whatever goes in. But when you had a chimney fire, it smelled pretty bad in the whole house, especially upstairs. But it was nice having that heat right there. We didn't have a heater up here, but the heat came off that chimney. And I remember painting this room, probably some of this. Places, I didn't paint that color there, but I remember mixing sand with paint to get a texture to it. Painting something in here. But this is a room that I had. Nothing much to say about it, really. This is where Mom and Dad slept. That was their room. Good sized room, I guess. I guess there's creepy stories to be heard, but I don't know those firsthand about this. There's where you could get up in the attic. I don't know if I've been up the attic forever and a half, to be honest with you. But at any rate, there's the other side of the same chimney. I mean, that's the other side of the room we were just in that I had it for a bedroom. Same chimney there, pretty big one. It'd be interesting to go up there in the attic. I don't know what's up there, if anything. But anyway, I don't remember there's no big stories other than maybe this is a creepy old house sometimes. But yeah. Okay, so this is one of the nearest the end. It's not the very end one of this hallway, but it's an old bedroom. And this one never got repapered. Look at that old paper with the ABCs and stuff. That's, who knows, that's old. I don't know how old, but that's old. But what name is right there?
Your sister.
Okay, this is Barbie Aldridge. So I don't know. I was thinking Barb didn't have this one, but she might have had this one, this room, because there's another room next to it. I thought she was in that one, but we probably all played in this room. And this is an old brass bed, antique. I just telling Axel, I remember this right here. Now I don't know if this is mine, but I remember doing that, sitting in bed doing this, even though this is a foot. But I remember doing this back and forth and stuff. I think originally they were hooked, but this very well could be my old one. Yeah, it's heavy duty brass, antique thing. But this is kind of cool with that old wallpaper on it. Okay, this is the end bedroom, and I think someone did have a bedroom here, but I don't know who. But it's typically, this is like the scary one, all by itself, and you can see the top wasn't finished off, so this certainly wouldn't have been a room that a kid would want to have, but had to have. But it's most recent years just for storage. But maybe the next people who have this will fix it all up. But this house right here is another chimney. A lot of these rooms, especially if they rented them out, would have had their own little heater in them, probably little wood stoves. So that's probably what that's all about. In a big old house like this with no insulation back in the day, would have been pretty cold. But yeah, there's nothing much to say about this except you can look out and see the barn where the barn used to stand. Now you can just see the, one-story barn. Just imagine a great big tall barn there. Back in the day, looking out through that window, you would have saw it. So, yep, nothing much. Just look at the old wallpaper though. That's got to be original stuff there. I don't know how old it is, but it'd be interesting to know. A lot of it's been scraped off. But if you look at the ceiling, that's the old lath and plaster. That's what all the walls and ceilings were, back originally.
This concludes our video. Thank you for watching. This has been Old Stuff.